Hi everyone, and welcome back to another webinar. This one is from part 3, which was techniques and criteria for monitoring the quality of assessment internally. Now, in this one, we're going to look at applied sampling and judgment. We're going to look at some practice examples, and we're going to scrutinise some decisions. So, as I mentioned in the previous webinar, we're using real samples from learners that Future Step has harboured in the past, real assessment, feedback and paperwork. And obviously the names have been changed, but the evidence is real. And then after that, I'm going to ask you to have a go at doing your own IQA activity. So bringing it all together at the end. All right, let's get into it. Okay, just to recap on webinar 2. Now, in that webinar, we looked at the purpose of an assessment plan. We looked at risk-based sampling principles, and we identified different types of risk, you might remember. We looked at assessors and learners, and then the risks applied to the different types of assessors and learners that you have, and then planning for coverage and timing. Right, so we put together an IQA plan on the IQA 3 template. Let's just get that up now. Okay, here was that plan. So you might remember we are looking at the work of 2 assessors, Rowan Sharma and Emma Carter. Rowan is an experienced assessor. Emma is newly qualified. So different approaches taken to each. Sampling types differ, as you remember. Rowan was random sampling, where we will select a random member or learner from his group. And Emma was risk-based sampling, so we're going to target specific areas of Emma's practice to see how she's getting on. I won't spend too much time there. This is actually available on the platform if you want to revisit this. Okay, just to revisit what monitoring quality actually means. So we're not remarking. We're looking for a number of different things across the evidence we're going to be presented with. Obviously, first and foremost would be validity. So we're going to check the accuracy and validity of the actual assessment decision that's been made by both Rowan and Emma. We're going to look at consistency across both assessors. So they're both working for the same organisation. Therefore, we want to standardise the types and levels of feedback that they're providing and their general assessment practice. So we're going to look at what differs between the two. We're going to look at the learner evidence, the sufficiency and authenticity of the evidence. So we're going to actually check that the assessors have awarded or not awarded grades based on the actual learner work being sufficient based on what the qualification is looking for. So we'll be looking at assignment questions at that point and the types of terminology and essay terminology within the assignment questions to check that's been echoed in the learner work. Quality of assessor feedback, we just mentioned that. We'll be looking at both of the feedback reports from both Emma and Rowan, looking at the difference in depth, tone, approach, relation to criteria, all sorts of things there. And then compliance with qualification requirements. So we'll have the course specification open. Touch on that a little bit more in a moment, but we're going to be making sure that the learner's work and the assessment decisions made are in line with the qualification requirements, and that if we were to submit these samples for a certificate claim at the awarding organisation, they would pass that and be certified without issue. That's our main aim here. Okay. Okay, so the qualification specification is an important document to pretty much underpin everything that you do in regards to your sampling, right? It should be a specification-led monitoring. You should be able to speak about the qualification, the requirements outlined within the specification comfortably. Okay, you should know the required standards within that qualification, the different units, the different assignments, the different assessment methods required. As an IQA, you should normally be only IQAing or sampling from qualifications you're either qualified in yourself or you have a lot of occupational experience within. So you're familiar with the qualifications and the industry standards and the types of, as I mentioned, assessment methods, assignment types, and etc. So you can offer professional expertise. However, you should always still review the qualification specification, or at least have it to hand so you can double check the work that you're doing as a quality assurer and make sure it does align with those specifications. Sometimes they're very lengthy, you're not expected to remember it all. So always just use the qualification specification as the backbone of what you're doing. You can't go too far wrong if you are referencing the qualification specification and making decisions based on what it's asking for. Okay, the assessment criteria and verbs, we just mentioned that a moment ago. Now, you have different essay terminology within assignment or assessment questions. Okay, so for example, you might have a question that asks you to identify something. You might have a question that asks you to explain something. And you might have a question that asks you to evaluate something. Now, all three of those questions, and because they contain that different individual terminology within each, are asking you to do different things. So the learner needs to demonstrate the difference in those types of questions. Now, from experience, if you have a question that asks you to identify, to summarize, to define, to describe, they're generally looking for short, simple examples of knowledge or understanding. Okay, you don't normally have to write in lots of depth and lots of detail. You're demonstrating in a concise manner that you understand what the question is asking. If you then have a question that asks you to explain, it's asking for a little bit more. So it's asking you to perhaps apply a practical example. So meet the describe or the identify criteria by demonstrating that knowledge again, but then apply it to your work in your working role or your workplace and apply that practical example so you're kind of doubling down on your knowledge evidence. And then evaluate or describe is normally looking for more depth. So you may go into more of an opinion. You may look at comparisons. You may bring in references, right? So you may have to use a referencing system like the Harvard referencing system, which is where you use other people's work or thoughts or opinions in your work to support or contrast your own thoughts, opinions, or your writing, right? So it's about making sure the work is and the marks that have been awarded are in line with those assignment verbs. Okay, we'll be looking at that shortly. And then the marking guidance. Now, some qualifications offer this, some don't. Some are left to assessor judgment. Some have quite a strict marking guidance. So in effect, it makes the assessor's job easier because they're using a specific marking or assessment guidance, which gives you kind of like what the learner should have included in their answers. So if one of those is available, have that ready as well. So if you have those three things, if they're all available, you then can start to compile your evidence and you have your foundations, right? So you can then on top of that, start looking at your learner work, your feedback reports and whatever else you can gather. Okay, so in front of me, I've got 4 key documents that I'm going to use to sample Rowan Sharma's assessment decision on his learner, Daniel Hughes. Now, in front of me, I have the learner feedback report. I always like to start there. I'll come back to why in a moment. We also have Daniel Hughes's assignment. Okay, so there's his work. And we have the marking guidance. So we do have a marking criteria for this qualification. It isn't the most detailed marking criteria, but we do have some examples of what the learner should have included in their work to support effective or accurate assessment decisions. So that's good. We'll be using that to map across shortly. And of course, as I mentioned, we also have the qualification specification. Now, these are always available. You can request them if they're not. In case you don't know what they are an outline of the qualification requirements and provided by the awarding organisation of whoever you're working for to deliver the qualification. Ours happens to be Focus Awards for this one. As you know, the qualification is the Level 3 award in education and training. So here's the qualification number. Always quote that in your writing and your documents to demonstrate accreditation where required. And then there's lots of other information on the qualification itself that we may need at any point. Okay, so let's start with the feedback report. Now, I always like to start with the feedback report. This is assuming I have a good understanding of the qualification itself and I don't need to review the specification. So the feedback report is where I normally begin because this gives me a lot in terms of, first of all, I'm going to understand what decision's been made. So what decision I'm looking to quality check. I get an understanding of the type of feedback the assessor has provided. You can see this is well structured and organised, which is good to see. And yeah, gives me a good insight into what I'm going to be faced with. Okay, so from there, I'm going to just take a quick look at the marking criteria just to familiarise myself with the depth of this. Okay, so I've got a good idea of what each question should include. And now I'm going to look and read through the learner's work. So here is Daniel's work. Okay, you can see the verbs for this unit. They're in dark or bolded writing here. We have an explain, summarize, and another explain here on the end. Okay, so as we read through Daniel's work, you can see there's nothing here that's just listed, which is good. This one's asking for the roles and responsibilities. So instead of just a bullet pointed list, we have some good examples here. These are backed up with practical or work-related examples, plus evidence of understanding, which is good. Over here in the key aspects of legislation question, we are related and quoted GDPR, which is good. This is linked to storage, so this is demonstrating more occupational understanding, which is good. And in this last section on equality and diversity, again, we've got lots of practical examples, which is good. For example, here, as you can see, I provide written instructions. That's always good to see. And then there's some reflective practice here as well. So overall, my initial opinion on this sample is that it is good. The work provided aligns with the verbs. So we have explain, and I would definitely say there's some good explanation there. Summarize, we've perhaps gone beyond what this question is asking for, but there is some good summary, some good examples there. And this last one, explain again, I would say that meets the criteria for what an explain verb is looking for. Okay, good. Let's move back to Rowan's feedback now. Okay, so Rowan's feedback is structured by question. You can see there's an individual feedback for question 1, question 2, and question 3. And I have to say, I do like that. I think that's good practice. I think that's easy for someone like me to see what's been provided in terms of feedback on answers. But I also think it's good for the learner, especially, to be able to read about each individual answer they provided. And if there is development points, they can clearly see where they need to improve, and also they can receive praise for individual parts of their assignment. So I do like that. There's specific strengths that have been identified. You have moved beyond listing, it says there, which is good. You've provided application to your own practice, which is evident. That's good again. We've got here a good developmental suggestion here. Your explanation could be slightly expanded, which is good. And we've got another one here to improve further. So that's good as well. They're well written as well. The language is positive, comes off Not critical, comes off developmental, which is good. The decision's clearly stated, which is good as well. And in general, the structure of the whole report is good. Now, one more thing we'll check is, look, we can see the date of the assessment was the 26th. If we go back to Daniel's assignment, we can see he submitted his assignment on the 25th. So that's good. The assessment was done within 24 hours, which is actually very quick. Good turnaround time for a feedback report to be provided. And keeps the learner on a smooth trajectory. They can receive their feedback quickly. They can move on with the next part of the course. There's no having to go back to work they've already done. So that's good. So as an IQA here, I would say the feedback justifies the decision. It explains why the learner met the criteria. Is it perfect? No, I think there's always ways that you could improve. I think there could be even more depth, perhaps. I'm very big on having to on suggesting keeping assessment work timely, but I do think there could be more detail here. If we did some technical and audit checks, I think so. There is signatures, there is dates. We saw that as well on the assessment. Although ideally they're digital electronic signatures, not just typed like this, but there is dates in that. So someone has, there is a signature under the candidate declaration, and Rowan has signed there. So that's good. Decisions recorded, dates are consistent. Would I agree with this decision? Yes, I would. Would you agree with that? What do you think? Okay. Let's move on to our newly qualified assessor, which is Emma. Again, we'll start with the feedback statement. Now here we can see a relatively well-organised feedback form again, but the first thing we notice is that the detail is much less, which is evident. However, there is still an obvious pass grade. There's dates, so that's good to see. But we do have significantly less detail provided than Rowan. Okay, then let's just have a quick check of Sophie's work. So again, Sophie's work, if we look at question 1, we've got a pretty basic description here. You can see in comparison to Daniel's, it is a lot less. If we look at question 2, legislation is listed here, but there's minimal application. There's no examples. We've got teachers should follow policies and procedures here. So nothing really to support a deep understanding of key aspects of legislation. It is only asking you to summarise that question though, so you do need to keep that in mind. It's not expecting perhaps as much as an explained question, but still that is very limited in terms of what we can get from that. Question 3, equality means treating everyone the same. That's not actually correct. It's about treating everybody fairly and providing equal opportunity. So that's not right. So obviously there's something to bring up there. Has the learner failed to meet the explain verb here? On my initial opinion is yes. There's a wrong definition and there isn't really any explanation. I treat all learners equally and fairly, which is the correct kind of definition, but there's no examples to back that up. So yeah, question 3 is lacking at the moment. I would say the verb in each, definitely in 1 and 3 isn't met. 2 is arguable, but still very thin. Okay, there's no applied context, there's no expansion, no real explanation. I think there's a validity issue here, and I would disagree with this decision at the moment. Okay, let's go back over to the assessor feedback from Emma. Now we can see here this is pretty generic commentary. You could copy and paste this and put this into a lot of different learner feedback forms. There's no real breakdown by question. I did say I like that. You don't always necessarily see that, but that is a good habit to get into. There's no criteria reference. There's no real development targets. There's no justification. Okay, so if an EQA asked me why was this passed, this feedback wouldn't defend me very well. So the issue here is not automatically the validity of the pass. The issue is assessor judgment, sort of like the articulation of that and the feedback quality as well. You've got to, as an assessor, the learner has to meet the minimum threshold against the specification, right? You could argue that the summarise question on the previous sheet we saw here does meet that minimum threshold. However, in general, the other two questions don't, and the feedback lacks sufficient reference to criteria and doesn't really provide any developmental guidance. So, yeah, I think we're disagreeing with this one. Right, there's a fine line between the minimum threshold being met and disagreeing completely with the decision, and it's going to be down to your own experience to be able to make that judgment correctly and accurately, consistently over time, right? And only kind of your built-up experience of the qualifications you're quality assuring is going to give you confidence in being able to do that. But there's a couple of things that clarify the professional boundaries you're looking at, right? So if the command verb is clearly not met, you can disagree. Okay, if the command verb is met but minimally met, agree, but you can add your development actions. And if the command verb is clearly met, then you're safe to agree, right? Your role isn't to push work from pass to merit. Okay, you can suggest that the assessor does that or provides feedback to try to achieve that, but it's not your job. Okay, your job is to protect validity and sort of promote consistency between assessors, and we can see there's a clear disparity and there's an inconsistency between Emma and between Rowan at the moment. And yeah. Okay, so thinking about risk just really quickly. So for Emma, we're looking at a development issue, so there's some feedback we can provide to her. There's a risk of sort of under-assessing here, risk of sort of weak feedback culture developing, so we need to jump onto that. And there's a risk of an EQA challenge as well. So a couple of things we need to jump on. We will be supporting Emma in the additional activities that we identified in IQA3. We have observations coming up, as you saw. There's standardizations. There's also one-to-one. So we can perhaps increase our risk-based sampling, target specific areas around Emma to support her in improving and working her way towards becoming consistently in line with what the company requires in terms of standards for feedback. Okay, documentation and audit trail just really quickly. So your sampling rationale, as you remember, we included in our plan, which is just your justification of why you selected the certain sampling type for that assessor or those assessors. Obviously, your decision and disagreement is key. That's what you're there to do. Then your feedback to the assessor. That's crucial. How you wrap that up and deliver that determines how effective that is and how your assessor responds to that. Your follow-up actions, it's important that you put your follow-up actions in place and deliver on those, and then your dates and signatures to contribute to your audit trail at all times. The quality is then visible throughout, and your role as an IQA is being done professionally. Okay, a couple of reflective comments to leave you with on the screen, but following the webinar, you will now be going on to complete an applied sampling task designed to replicate IQA practice. I'm going to ask you to create a basic sampling and tracking plan. Then there's an assessment pack. It contains like a learner submission, assessor feedback, marking criteria, and the qualification specs from the Level 3 award in education and training. So it's a continuation of what we've just done. This accounts for the learning activities in part 3. So jump onto there now, have a go at that. Feel free to get in touch if you want to discuss that. Enjoy. Thanks for watching. I'll speak to you again soon.